I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, more cases of measles are reported in San Diego County connected to an outbreak at Disneyland. And in a special investigative report tonight, we look at the resurgence of whooping cough, especially among teenagers who got vaccinated. Also this evening, San Diegans drawing a line in Mission Beach to draw attention to rising sea levels. And San Diego remembers civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Measles continues to spread through San Diego following an outbreak at Disneyland. It's shaping up to be the county's worst measles outbreak in decades. For more on the story, we're joined by KPBS science reporter David Wagner. David, the health department reported 10 cases of measles last week. What's new?
Well, today the county's Health and Human Services Agency reported 3 new suspected measles cases. Like most of the previous cases, these 3 patients were not vaccinated. So meanwhile, in Rancho Bernardo, Sharp Healthcare closed an urgent care clinic after encountering a suspected measles patient. That clinic was closed for about 5 hours, but it's since reopened. So if lab tests come back confirming that these patients do in fact have measles, this will be the worst measles outbreak San Diego has seen since the early 90s.
And what should folks know right now?
Yeah, Health and Human Services is trying to get information out to anyone at high risk. That includes anyone not vaccinated against measles, infants under 12 months, and people with compromised immune systems. These new cases were clustered in North County, and health officials have released a list of locations and specific dates where people may have been exposed. The list includes grocery stores and a movie theater. We've got all that information up on our website, kpbs.org.
KPBS science reporter David Wagner. More than 1,800 people were diagnosed with whooping cough last year in the county, the highest number in decades. Scientists are trying to figure out why the disease is making a comeback. It's a question KPBS and iNewsSource first asked in a 2010 investigative series. The answer, at least in part, has to do with the vaccine itself, as we hear from iNewsSource reporter Joanne Farian.
Frontal disease.
Correct. It is not
where the fluid comes up.
Yeah. If there's an epidural, it's not.
Dr. John Bradley is director of infectious diseases at Rady Children's Hospital and a professor at UC San Diego School of Medicine.
Boy, her maxillaries are clear.
Bradley was training to be a pediatrician in San Francisco back in 1976 when one of his sons, just a baby, got his first whooping cough immunization.
He started fussing and then within an hour was just screaming. And my job as a pediatrician is to know who's sick and who's not. And when you're screaming and you're inconsolable, you're sick.
Back then, babies and kids got a vaccine different from the one today. It was called a whole cell vaccine, loaded up with a purified version of the bacteria known to cause whooping cough. It did its job. It nearly wiped out the disease by the mid-70s. But it also caused a lot of side effects. When researchers developed a new vaccine in the late 90s, one that promised to be as effective as the old one without all the problems, Bradley and everyone else in the medical community embraced it. Fast forward about 16 years, and the babies who were among the first to get the new vaccine are now teenagers and among the hardest hit by the latest whooping cough epidemic. Like 16-year-old Matthew Schaefer. He's camera shy and doesn't want to be interviewed. His mom, Paige Schaefer, says Matthew was so sick with whooping cough last August, he missed more than 2 months of school.
It kept him up all night, pretty much. It was worse during the evenings, nighttime. He'd cough so much he'd end up throwing up.
Whooping cough, scientifically known as pertussis, often referred to as the 100-day cough by doctors, can cause a cough so bad you can't catch your breath. For infants, it can be deadly. Matthew was fully immunized. 5 doses of the vaccine by the time he was 5, a booster when he was 12, and an additional booster, one not required by the state, just months before he got sick. In California last year, teens between the ages of 14 and 16 accounted for almost a quarter of all whooping cough cases. An iNewsSource analysis of state data shows where the immunization status of those teens is known, nearly 3/4 had received all of their required doses.
The vaccine doesn't work as well as we thought it was. Even though we know it's not the best vaccine, it's even less effective than we thought.
Bradley should know. Back in 2010, he wondered why he was seeing babies hospitalized, some dying for whooping cough.
The babies were just the tip of the iceberg.
When Bradley and his colleagues took a closer look at all the whooping cough cases in San Diego County, they expected to see huge numbers of unimmunized kids. Instead, they were surprised to learn most had their shots.
Our manuscript was going to be the first publication, scientific publication, that was going to question the efficacy of the vaccine.
At first, Bradley had trouble getting it published.
But it's the fear that if we say the vaccine doesn't work, then people will stop getting the vaccine. And I want to hasten to add that there are now subsequent data to show that if you get immunized, even though you may not prevent infection, if you get infection, it's milder.
The paper was eventually accepted into the Journal of the Pediatric Infectious Diseases Society in 2012. Up until studies like Bradley's, public health officials and the media blamed parents who refused to immunize their kids for the outbreaks. Research has shown they likely only played a limited role.
And we want people to trust that vaccines are the right thing, and we don't want to tell them anything that would undermine that. But in the context where the truth is the truth, we have to share the truth. To paint yourself in a corner saying, oh, this is a fine vaccine, it's their fault, is not addressing the true problem.
There is also research suggesting a new strain of the bacteria which causes whooping cough could be contributing to the outbreaks here in California and worldwide. Dr. Andrew Preston is a scientist at the University of Bath in the UK. His research shows the bug that causes whooping cough is evolving and may have serious consequences for the ability of current vaccines to continue to control pertussis. Preston has been paying close attention to the epidemic in the U.S.
As you guys, particularly in California, know, it's quite possibly a mixture of things, which I know sounds kind of a typically overcautious statement, but it's almost uncertainly the case.
He and other scientists say many factors, such as the mutating strain and better tools to diagnose whooping cough, may be contributing to higher numbers. Bradley says until a new vaccine is developed, health officials have to make the best use of the one they have now, including giving boosters to pregnant women to protect their newborn babies. But, he cautions, too many boosters, and there is a risk the vaccine can have the opposite effect and make you more susceptible to getting sick. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource reporter Joanne Farian.
You can find more about the resurgence of whooping cough on our website, kpbs.org. Jury selection begins tomorrow in the murder trial of San Diego native James Holmes, accused of killing 12 people and wounding dozens of others in a Colorado movie theater. There are 9,000 people in the jury pool. Analysts say it could take until June to find 12 jurors and 12 alternates. Holmes admits to the shooting but has pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. San Diego police are investigating more incidents of razor blades left in a park in Mission Bay. KPBS reporter Matt Bowler has the latest.
San Diego police have retrieved 7 razor blades hidden in the grass between a jungle gym and picnic benches at Mission Bay's Bonita Cove Park over the weekend. This is the 4th time in 18 months razors have been found at this park. Tom Jackson has been coming to Bonita Cove for over 40 years, and until today, he never worried about being barefoot.
It's never been a concern, no. Maybe bottles broken in the parking lot or something like that, but never razor blades in the grass. Never thought of anything like that.
He's baffled why anyone would hide razor blades in a playground.
It makes no sense to me. I can't think of why somebody would do that.
Jackson says he'll wear his shoes from now on. Matt Bowler, KPBS News.
A solar company expected to create 450 jobs in Rancho Bernardo says it's actually cutting 100 jobs. Soitec got a VIP welcome to San Diego in 2011, and it was expected to provide panels for SDG&E projects, but the utility says Soitec missed deadlines. The company says it's restructuring to focus on its core electronics business. Dozens of volunteers fanned out today near the roller coaster in Mission Beach to literally draw attention to the impact sea level rise could have on low-lying beach areas in San Diego County. Walking, running, or biking Mission Beach could one day be threatened by what's known as king tides. Expected this week along San Diego's coastline, the huge tides and high surf can cause strong rip currents that lead to flooding in low-lying areas along the beaches. Business owner Jason Dong knows all about it.
You can see even a small minor flood, there's still puddles right here.
That's why volunteers with San Diego 350 were using chalk along the Mission Boulevard sidewalk to illustrate where climate researchers from Scripps Institution of Oceanography project massive flooding will occur within the next 35 years due to a combination of high tides and big storms.
We've got to act now. Here, because this, Coronado, South Bay, and La Jolla are most at risk with the water rise. With just 1.5 feet of sea level rise, which is what's anticipated in the very near future, all of this will be underwater every high tide.
Like the mercury in a thermometer, scientists say the sea is rising now because water expands as it warms. They also say those higher temperatures are melting glaciers and sea ice at a faster rate worldwide. Organizers say supporting green energy initiatives and driving less would certainly help reduce the problem. Business owner Dong agrees.
Especially nowadays, people don't think longevity, they think what happened tomorrow. And you guys represent what happened, for future to come. And it's impacting, either take care of the solution now or do it, when it happens, it's already too late. The High Water Line Art Project is one of similar events held across the country, including in San Francisco, New York, and Miami.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, we travel to Nevada to see how the president's actions on immigration affect families. That's Monday on the PBS News Hour.
Today, the nation remembers the contributions of civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and looks at the work still remaining. Amitha Sharma begins our coverage.
Martin Luther King Jr. fought hard for the Voting Rights Act, which was signed into law 50 years ago this August. The U.S. has come a long way since the days when African Americans were subjected to poll taxes and literacy tests. But many worry a new kind of voter disenfranchisement is underway. Ryan Haygood, Deputy Director of Litigation at the NAACP's Legal Defense and Educational Fund, is with me to talk about what's happening. Ryan, before we get into the challenges that voters face, take me back to the days before the Voting Rights Act bill was signed into law. What was it like for African Americans?
I appreciate that question. It's hard to imagine what it was like pre-Voting Rights Act, given the diversity that we see in our state legislatures across the country today, and given that we've now twice elected an African American to the highest office in the land. But pre-Voting Rights Act, pre-1965, political participation by black and other people of color was non-existent. I think of Selma, Alabama, for example, where there were 15,000 age-eligible black Americans who would have otherwise been eligible to vote. But at that time, pre-1965, there were fewer than 100 registered black voters. And that wasn't because black voters didn't want to take hold of the promise of democracy, but they simply weren't able to because states erected a number of barriers. Literacy tests that required the recitation from memory of the Alabama Constitution. There's a famous story in Alabama about how even the most learned African Americans, a man who had earned a PhD, couldn't pass Alabama's literacy test. The Voting Rights Act, the first thing it did was did away with literacy tests. And for that reason, the Voting Rights Act was really a transformative moment in American history.
So you recently co-wrote a report called The Battle to Protect the Vote. You say the United States is experiencing an assault on Voting Rights Act that is historic in its scope and in its intensity. What are you seeing?
Sure. So I think, one of the things that Dr. King taught us is that America's relationship with democracy has always been contested. one that's been characterized by broad expansions of the electorate, followed swiftly by efforts to make voting more difficult for people, particularly people of color. So I think we've seen in the last several years, particularly following the election of President Barack Obama, states erect a number of impediments to the franchise.
What are those impediments?
And the heart, I think, of this effort is the photo ID effort. In the last several years, more than 30 states have either considered and or adopted restrictive, very discriminatory photo ID measures. And this really has sort of become the heart of the voter suppression effort. And it happens at a time in which the demographics of this country are changing. America is projected to be a majority people of color nation by 2042. In the last several election cycles, people of color have participated in historic numbers in elections, and we received a devastating decision from the Supreme Court a couple of years ago that struck a core part of the Voting Rights Act.
Well, let's talk about that.
Sure.
When that decision was reached, what was the effect of it?
Sure. So this decision was one in which the Supreme Court struck a core part of the Voting Rights Act. This provision really required some of the places in our democracy that are most sort of entrenched with racial discrimination to submit all of their voting changes to the federal government for approval before they took effect. And this was really a way in which Section 5 operated as our democracy's discrimination checkpoint. When the Supreme Court essentially struck this provision, states were free to enact voting changes, and then they would be challenged after they were implemented. So Texas, for example, within hours of this decision, announced that they were going to implement immediately their photo ID measure, but that had previously been struck by this part of the Voting Rights Act, which is now gone. Texas was able to implement within hours of the decision one of the nation's most racially discriminatory, most restrictive photo ID measures.
So what is the motive for these voter suppression efforts? Why has there been a contraction in voting rights?
You know, I think that's a great question, and it's, you know, when you sort of wrestle with the motivations, it's disillusioning because there is a sense that the way you win an election is either by getting more people out to vote than your opposition or by shrinking the electorate so that fewer people can participate. The photo ID measure is a good example of a way in which one can make voting more difficult and disqualify any number of people. So in Texas, for example, Texas's photo ID law has disqualified 1 million eligible voters and 600,000 registered voters. These 600,000 registered voters previously used things like utility bills and bank statements, hunting and fishing licenses. They're now required to produce one of 6 kinds of government-issued photo ID, which they don't have.
And very quickly,
Sure.
What's the solution?
The solution is, you know, today I have to say, you know, I came from New York here to San Diego to participate in the San Diego Alliance San Diego's All People's celebration. And I got to tell you, they attracted 1,000 people to this event. And the solution is really finding ways to engage people past the commemoration. Today's Dr. King's birthday. People commemorate his legacy. But democracy is not self-executing, and it really requires maintenance, and it requires us to participate in the maintenance of the democracy to ensure its vibrancy and its inclusion.
We've got to close it there. Ryan
Sure.
Haygood, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
As we just heard, more than 1,000 people attended the 27th annual All People celebration this morning in Balboa Park. Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks was there and asked attendees what actions we can take to help further equality once MLK Day is over. Here's what they had to say.
I think one of the most important things is actually getting engaged, finding a tool, if it's the NAACP, if it's some organization that can really foster encouragement and growth, have the conversation, but have action items come out of that organization.
It seems like we talk about it like after the problem has occurred, so like the Ferguson case and all those. But I hope that those conversations lead more towards like, you know, getting the right teachers or helping that one student.
It's easy to talk about it in groups of people where you're all the same, but you need to really try and involve yourself with people who are different from you.
I teach foreign language, and a real important aspect of foreign language is understanding other cultures, and I try and promote that in my work with the children.
I think it's really important to encourage people from all walks of life, all corners of this community to serve in civic life. It's not enough to simply vote on election day, although that's really important, and I want them to do that. It's also important to place individuals with different perspectives, different life experiences in public discourse.
A new book puts the spotlight on one of Dr. King's closest friends and trusted advisors, but as Peggy Pico tells us, chances are you've probably never heard of him.
The Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott in 1956 brought Stanley Levison and Martin Luther King Jr. together. Levison, a white Jewish businessman, and Dr. King, a nonviolent civil rights leader. But Levison had once been a member of the Communist Party. Their unusual friendship is the focus of the new book, Dangerous Friendship, written by my guest, San Diego author, scholar, and rabbi Ben Kamen. And Ben, you've said I can call you Ben, so I'm going to call you Ben. What was this relationship like between Dr. King and Levison? Did Levison work for King?
Well, he didn't actually work for him, but he worked with him, and he followed his life pattern of taking his great personal treasury. I was very successful as a businessman. He had 2 law degrees, but never practiced law because he just succeeded in many different phases of the business world. And he donated his money, he gave his money to help causes that he believed in. They were generally leftist causes, socialist causes, and certainly freedom rights causes. And when he met King, he was just enamored of both this new Negro revolution and King's personal qualities, and they complemented each other.
In his funding, as you mentioned in your book, this funding of the civil rights movements, if you will, how come we haven't heard much about Levison then?
Well, one reason is because Stanley did not seek to be heard of, and he felt that keeping a low profile would enhance his ability to do things behind the scenes for King, to call people, to quietly get money to King when he was in jail and needed to be bailed out. And he just wasn't ambitious for that. He actually was a good man who got satisfaction from helping to underwrite, not only financially, but even emotionally and culturally. And by being a friend to King outside of King's immediate circle of African-American preacher colleagues, to be a kind of intellectual comrade. These guys just loved each other. They connected.
What kind of documents and who did you talk to in order to get at this story and get the things you needed for this book?
Well, this story, I really spent 2 years back and forth between San Diego and Stanford University to the King Institute, which really opened its doors to me. And there are some 70,000 pages of surveillance files, letters shared by King and Levison to each other and other people in that immediate circle. But the key person who I spoke to, and I'm still speaking to, who's alive and well, thank goodness, is a remarkable man, an African-American attorney named Clarence Jones, who was King's personal attorney. And Clarence, who is now a very feisty 84 years old and still teaching at Stanford, and Stanley also became bonded. They called each other brothers. And these 2 guys worked to draft King's speeches, edit his books and so forth. So that's who I spoke to.
Was Levison still a member of the Communist Party when he was helping Dr. Levison?
Absolutely not, and that's the key issue. He had been a member of the party, but he had disavowed it completely, stopped giving it money, stopped participating by the time he met King, because he was disillusioned with the Soviet Union, particularly in light of the invasion of Hungary by Soviet tanks and the slaughter of freedom fighters. And he got it, that these guys, this was not utopia, that this was a bad empire. So he was looking for a new cause, so it was very timely.
But back then, guilt by association, if you knew somebody and you were friends with somebody who was part of the Communist Party, you therefore must be the Communist Party, was the idea and the thinking back then. How dangerous was the idea that Stanley had been in the Communist Party for Dr. Luther King and his movement?
So dangerous that many of Stanley's friends, other white people, Jews and Italians who are in the Communist Party, were angry at him and said, don't get close to this wonderful young man. He's just starting out. This is a great movement. You're going to bring him down, because that guilt by association. And in fact, that's what happened. J. Edgar Hoover caught on to this, and he had a congenital distaste for King, probably on racial grounds, and he began to systemically lie to the Kennedy brothers, who now were Attorney General and President, that King had a very close friend who was a communist, and therefore King is a communist. And that broke up the ability of the Kennedy brothers to support the civil rights movement before President Kennedy died, actually.
Do you think that King understood that this was what was happening and that this was part of the reason that, that basically it slowed down his movement?
Well, he understood it very well, because President Kennedy called him into the White House, took him out into the Rose Garden in June of '63, into the Rose Garden, because he himself, the president, was afraid of being wired and tapped by Hoover, and told King, I understand you've got this communist in your entourage. Get rid of Levison or I can't support your civil rights bill. So King did, and they began to communicate through third parties.
It's Martin Luther King Day.
Yes.
We understand the reference to that.
Yeah.
But why is this important to read now? What takeaways do you want people to read, so long ago about how it could have an impact
It's more
today?
important now than ever because we are extremely concerned, as we should be, and we should be outraged by government overreach and by the constant surveillance of our mail, our emails, our internet, everything. This surveillance issue is entirely pervasive. Who would have thought that this narrow issue that affected two men and a movement at that time is now endemic to our society? So this book is not so much about civil rights or my other books, which are about Dr. King per se. It's about this issue of government interfering with movements like a freedom movement. It was outrageous.
All right, on that note, author Ben Kamen, thank you very much.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Warmer temperatures are on the way to San Diego, mid-60s to low 70s along the coast. Upper 60s to low 70s for the inland valleys. Cooler, though, in the mountains over the next few days. And mid to upper 70s for the desert. Tonight's stories are online at kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.